270, are you there?
Marjorie Opie from Louisville, Kentucky.
How you doing today?
I'm doing fine.
I'm doing good too. How can I help you today?
Well, I just would like for you to just tell me sort of what you're getting, and I feel it will be appropriate and the most important thing for you to know.
Okay, what I need you to do is tell me about your first 10 minutes of the day. Be as specific as possible when you first woke up. What I'm going to do is tune into the infinite you.
I had to get up real early this morning because I was loading up some baby goats, and they had to be loaded up into the truck by about 8 o'clock this morning, and I had to get out to the barn.
Okay. Did you dream last night?
I didn't.
Okay. When's the last time you dreamed?
I dreamed pretty often. I write them down. And so I know I dreamt just a couple of nights ago.
Do you remember that dream at all?
I haven't. I don't have my
what I'm
notebook
getting at is it's all right. You don't need to go get it. What I'm getting at, there's a long separation between your dreaming patterns. So what it is you're on a cyclical dreaming pattern. That's actually pretty good, all right? It's not a bad thing. The cyclical type of dreamings you have are like when a thunderstorm rolls into an area, it brings down all the water, brings all the thunder, brings all the rain, and then as it moves out, the land is changed. This is what's going on in your dream world. There's some type of pattern linked to the weather that's creating your dream world. So you are very much linked to being a weather-based soul this lifetime. You know, how do you do anything with thunderstorms? Do you like read them?
Do I do anything with what? You cut it out.
Do you like thunderstorms? Is that one of the big things that you like?
I love them. I love them. I absolutely love thunderstorms. And it's unusual because my mother, when I was little, all the time I was growing up, she would literally scream and be frantically upset over storms the whole time I was growing up, and I absolutely just loved them and still do.
Okay. And that right there is to tell you that you're a weather-based person this lifetime. Every time a thunderstorm comes, get out there and greet it. Get out there and do a meditation before it comes. Get out there and lie on the grass or just try to experience the thunderstorm. And then when you go to bed that night, or if you can, even if it's a bad thunderstorm, lay down on your couch, close your eyes, and just listen to the thunderstorms. And allow that vision to lead you into your dream world. Okay? Your dreams are tied to the weather patterns around you. The more rain and the more thunderstorms you have, the more dreams you're going to have. They are literally bringing the energy for your dreaming. Now, on a little different note, what's coming and holding you from having deeper and more powerful dreams is the burdens you're carrying this life. How many kids do you have?
3.
Okay. They're a lot to handle, aren't they?
No, actually, they were not. You're picking up something else, and I know what you're picking up.
Okay, what is it?
My 3 sons were raised, and they are young men, and they have left home, and they are doing incredibly well. And I sense I know what you're picking up because of the dilemma I went through as I was raising my sons. But my sons actually were just they were pieces of gold as I went through what I went through.
Okay. Because what I'm getting is your burden basket is full. And you had spent so much of your lifetime taking the burdens of others, and it's time that you separated your burdens from other people. And this is that self-reliant moment, just like, when you go to clean out your purse, once a month or whatever, you got to do it. You have to do this on a spiritual level. and understand that everything you take out there has a story behind it. You know, on a conceptual metaphor, everything that you take out of your burden basket has a story to it. And you have to recognize and acknowledge the story of each of those burdens and let the truth be your protection. I held this burden because I was holding space for this person. I held this burden because I was unable to deal with the energies of my childhood. I held this burden because I'm unable to process all the energies with a friend that's in drama. Okay? You have to acknowledge those.
I'm connecting with what you're saying, because I recently have taken a great vacation in life, and I live on a beautiful 65-acre farm in the middle of nowhere, and I am surrounded by nature, and I get to sleep in every morning, which I don't. I always greet the sun with a prayer. But anyway, I'm having a hard time understanding where you're going with this.
These are burdens that you've carried in your life, and these are burdens that have been in this basket for a very long time. It's not about where you live.
I might not feel like it.
That's the thing. At times, we believe we've let go of all the burdens, but in fact, we've only let go of the surface of the burdens. There are times that we stuff things so deep down inside, the only way to get to them is to be on a 65-acre ranch after your children have left, so you can take the time to deeply introspectively look at the process of your life. These are spiritual contracts that are holding these energies in place. I frequently talk about fine print, and the fine print contract here is literally acting as a cork of memory, not allowing you to see the way you had to take energy from other people when you were young. When you were young, did your parents, put you in situations that felt you uncomfortable socially? Did they argue a lot in front of you?
Oh, yes.
All right,
yes,
that's what I'm referring to. That is negative spiritual energy that's literally being held in your energetic field. And that's what influences us through the rest of our life, and what powers the fine print in the contract to keep us in negative habit patterns. So really what you're doing is you're going deep down inside in your perfect place and say, you know what? I'm good enough. My kids are good. I don't need this energy anymore. I don't need this in my life anymore. To free it up.
Can I just ask you if you have any information on one thing? I'm a singer-songwriter, and this song came to me, and it made me cry every time I sang it, and it was about me raising a child. And this child, at the very end, the very last time I sang this song in tears, this child cried. And this was my sister in this lifetime who basically, for some unknown reason, who I totally adore, and have no understanding why she does not like me. I feel such anger from her all the time. And I was wondering if that might be what you're feeling is my biggest burden, or am I carrying much more than that?
Much more than that. And I'm not gonna directly out this, but there's some things that happened to you when you were 3 and 4 years old in the family structure. This isn't abuse. This is extreme arguing. And you were in a very psychic growing stage then, and you just absorbed all of it. And then when you were 6, 7, and 8 years old, there was an extreme amount of energies between two sides of the family. Do you remember like a family argument between other cousins or relatives?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
All right. That is what I'm referring to. And you are literally like a battery of that energy because you were trying to balance the family, and you were such a young kid and you weren't realizing you were taking the adult energies, the adult psychic energies, and enforcing it onto your energy body.
Okay. So how can so nature? I've been 7 years now in nature on my farm, trying to basically heal because I have felt very burdened.
Caller, caller, will you hold on? That's the music at the top of the hour, and we'll go over with you. We're really getting somewhere with you. So hold on. We'll be back after the break. And we are talking to a caller from the 270 area code. 270, are you still there?
I'm still here.
So, as we're giving you, our psychic perceptions here, I know as this reading's gone, further and further and further, we've gotten to some of the roots of what's going on with you. Are you understanding what I'm saying about what we're saying about is holding on to these energies when you're a kid? It's the perceptions of the young child that are influencing the adult you.
Okay, I do, very much. And what I thought after 7 years of going into this place of quiet and solitude, because I know exactly what you're talking about, and actually it didn't get any better as I grew up and as I was a young mother. So 7 years of being out here in the most beautiful land in Kentucky and just having my gardens and my animals, I thought I could have healed by now. What else can I do?
This is some of the hardest energy to healing. And honestly, the true way of dealing with that energy is fasting. This energy is literally inside your gut, inside the mucus layer of your intestines. When you're that young and you're exposed to that level of adult arguing and adult negative psychic data, as a child you have nowhere left to go but to literally stick it in your internal organs, your intestines, your liver, your heart, your lungs, because they hold a very dense kind of energy. And when you're exposed to that, a young child, it makes you grow up, it shatters your innocence, and it reshapes the way you're supposed to do it, and it greatly affects your menstrual cycles also. When's the last time you did a fast?
A month ago.
Did you? 4 days. How many days did you do?
4.
Were you still crapping at the end?
No, I wasn't. I didn't have anything coming out.
Did you have anything that looked like a black water?
No, because I have fasted much in my life.
Unless you see the black water, there's a mucus layer in your intestines, and unless you see the black water come out, you're actually not getting to the actual point of the fast. You can purge and get stuff out of your colon, which frees you up and allows you to go through a secondary healing stage. But if you're not actually breaking down the mucus layer so it has to rebuild itself, you're actually not completing the fast. I've met people that have gone as many as 18 days before they got to the black water.
Okay, I can try to go 18 days. I don't know if I can go more than that.
Honestly, it's not about the number of days. It's how you start the fast. I'm honestly going to tell you, you need to go and do a colonic. All right? I know you're in the middle of nowhere, Kentucky. Do you have someplace you can go and do a colonic?
I have a person that does this, but believe it or not, I feel like I do a better colonic than she does, if you believe that.
Right,
or not.
you can use the three bags of water. You may end up having to 2 colonics 3 days apart, and then start your fast on the 4th day.
I can do that.
And the reason I say that is the mucus layer is extremely petrified in you. So all the water you're drinking, are you using, what kind of water are you using for your fast?
I use 2 types of water. I use distilled spring water and then just spring water from my spring here on the farm.
All right, I'd honestly stop using distilled water, and you might actually just consider what's called a juice fast. All right, can you drink pineapple juice?
Well, pineapples are radiated before they come into this country, and I don't like pineapples because of that.
Well, you need some type of acidic juice to start breaking down
oranges?
the mucus layer.
How about
you
tomatoes?
can do oranges. You just have to be real careful with them. Oranges can make you go too acidic too fast. All right. Grape juice. No. Grapefruit juice. What about grapefruit?
Grapefruit. Oh, definitely can do that.
All right. So what you're going to do is You can water that down. I'd actually recommend you drink it whole, drink your grapefruit juice whole, stop using distilled water, and then you can add water on top of that because you want it to go in and go hard.
How much grape juice and how much water? Is it half?
Well, when you fast, how much water are you drinking? You're drinking about 10, 15 cups a day?
When I fast, I drink about 4 cups a day.
Oh, that's nowhere near the amount. You should be drinking at least 10 cups of water a day. If not 15 or closer to 20, quite literally.
All right.
And that goes for everyone that's fasting. And that's the only way you break down the mucus layers, by saturating its surface layer, and then the mucus layer loses its hard callus layer, and then there's actually a cellular membrane that holds the mucus layer in place, and that cellular membrane opens up like a sponge and allows more mucus out, and that mucus holds the most amount of toxins and psychic data. Okay?
All right. So I will do that. And
grapefruit juice.
And just,
honestly, if you can find, Anne, will you please mute your mic? We can hear you over there. You're going to need quite a few grapefruits. I would say target of 6 days. All right. And you're really looking for the black water. On day 4, you can try a colonic. Okay. So what my recommendation is, before you decide to do the fast, do a colonic, do your best colonic you could do. And then get your grapefruits ready, get yourself ready to do the fast, and just before you decide to start the fast, either take some kind of oral thing that flushes all the fluids out of you, because you want some food in your stomach to flush out. You want to start crapping something for the fast. Otherwise your colon's just going to turn off. So you do the colonic, start eating some food, and then take something to flush you out, or do another colonic, and then start your fast 2 days after that. You understand what I'm saying?
Let me try to repeat it.
Okay.
Do a colonic.
Correct.
And eat that same day. And then 2 days later, start my fast the next morning, I guess. And then 2 days later, do another colonic.
During the fast.
During the fast, right.
Correct.
And then on the 4th day, do another colonic. Do I
No,
eat
you
on
don't
the
have.
second day?
You don't have to do a third colonic. You can take the second colonic to the 4th day. The goal is you're trying to see the black water come out. Okay?
Okay.
If you see the black water coming out, you start drinking the pineapple juice, and not pineapple, grapefruit juice, and you start seeing the black water coming out, you'll know it right away. It'll stink to high heaven. It'll have mold in it, all sorts of stuff, candida in it, and that's the organisms that are holding the psychic data. As soon as you're done with your fast, make sure you take a probiotic to restart, a probiotic or acidophilus to restart your system.
Okay. Now, would it be all right I make goat yogurt. Would it be all right to keep goat yogurt in my system during the fast?
Yes. Honestly, yes, it can be. And you could even consider taking dandelions or kale and having one big meal in the middle of your fast, so it acts like a snowplow going through you.
Sounds good, yeah. I got great kale in the garden right now.
Okay? And this is a hybrid type of fast, because you've done so many fasts in your life, you just haven't gotten to the point where you can break down the callus mucus layer. The combined acidity of the grapefruits with the amount of fluids that you're drinking, combined with the colonic and the kale, will literally clean you out good.
All right, how many grapefruits do I need to juice each day?
I would say at least 5 cups of juice a day. And then the rest of it, you need at least 10 cups of water. You can go to 8
So
cups of juice and 5 cups of water.
Of pure grape juice.
I could go up. You could go up to 8.
Okay, so 8 cups of grapefruit juice, pure, and then add 10 cups of water.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, if that's
a
too
lot
much,
of grape
I know.
fruit.
If that's too much for you, you can adjust it down to 5 cups.
Okay, 5 cups of grapefruit juice with about 10 cups of water a day.
Correct. That's 150 ounces of water. I'm sorry, 15 times 8, that's 40. That's 130 ounces of water a day, and they recommend 60 to 80 ounces of water a day. When you're on a fast, you should be way over that limit.
Okay.
The whole point is to overload your fluids and let yourself just get it all out.
Okay.
And you're going to have to be careful. I mean, you haven't drank that much water in a long time, and you could get a little silly on it, all right, when you have that much water in you. That's why you need the juice. Okay?
Right.
Okay? Any other questions?
Where did I come from? What planet?
You're Arcturian.
Arcturian?
Yep. You are a part of the Arcturian collective called Jinak Nupor. It's a very old Arcturian collective. And you should be out taking pictures of yourself at night, and you'll find orbs all over.
Taking a picture of myself?
At night, yes.
I have these beautiful lights that always flash around me, and I've never met anybody who has them, and I don't know what they are.
They're Arcturian vehicles of energy. I have met many, many, many. If you go to my Facebook wall, you'll meet a gentleman who called into the show last week, who I told him to say he's an Arcturian collective also, and he just went out and took pictures of them per my suggestion. And he is having orbs show up everywhere. Absolutely everywhere.
Yeah. And
so start taking pictures of orbs.
But
yeah,
these are lights I can see. You know.
And these are lights that everyone can see because they're Arcturian energy vehicles.
But I've never met anyone who's noticed that I have these lights. It's like I'm the only one that can see them.
Well, if you start taking pictures of them, you'll notice that they extend a zone of trust so you can take pictures of them.
Okay.
All right, I've got to move on to the next caller.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Hey, Andre, how you doing?
Good evening.
Hi. I was just telling Mandy about the YouTube and the search engine stuff that we talked about yesterday.
Ah, yes, yeah. Outsource validation.
Yes, that term, outsourcing validation. I totally forgot that.
Well,
Okay, hold on.
I've actually got a concept that people operate in called external validation. Like, I've written about it in all my writing, and I use it as like, you know, those like sacred neutral perspective sort of terms.
Yep.
So I define it, and then I use it all through my writing, because it's like people don't realize that they actually give power away by getting confirmation from others rather than self-validating. It's sort of a fabric that people operate on that they don't know about. It's very subtle. Laughing, giggle part. It's true. It's true.
It is.
I was just telling Mandy about some of the analytic services that could possibly be used to help explain how to find out if a website is actually a trafficked website or if it's just something that's there as fake, as to collect resources. And one of them was the Alexa service that gives you information about websites.
Okay. I've never heard of it. Alexa.
Just type in alexa.com, Alexa. Here, let me just give you it. Hold on.
It's alright, I'll find it.
All right. So this will also tell you how to adjust your website too, how it's globally perceived.
Oh, wow. Andre, there's a rank for you, for yours.
Is there?
Yeah.
An Amazon company. Fascinating.
It wasn't an Amazon company until about a year ago. It was completely independent before that. Less than a year ago. Early 2016, they bought them out.
So are you saying I'm super famous now, Mandy, or something?
Yeah, you're getting there. Look at you.
13 million. Wow, I'm rocketing up something. I'm down 1.2 million or something. Don't start me with charts. My 5th top search is Andrew's name spelt wrong.
Yeah. I know. I was looking at that too.
It's cool to see your own stats, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, it's fascinating what layers are there, you know,
Yep.
to potentially analyze. Because I mean, like, marketing these days is it's a total mathematical engineering sort of thing rather than just a perception thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But Amazon's interesting. They're sort of expanding into other non-previously explored markets, that's for sure.
Because they are doing something special with their analytics that they've learned. I'm absolutely certain of that.
Oh, I've got no doubt.
Yeah.
Like, the tentacles are expanding.
Yes. The Hydra.
Yeah.
Hydra of materialism and consumerism trying to figure us out through our habit patterns.
Well, I mean, I'm sure there's some very smart sort of, it'd be similar to the high frequency trading sort of programs that work out algorithms, you know?
Yeah. Global algorithms at that. When is the best time to globally introduce stuff?
I mean, Amazon and eBay are very fascinating things because, like during the 90s, like the tech bubble, who actually survived and endured it, and they're pretty much the main industries and sort of like markets that sort of maintain their status after. Because a lot was false and crap, but then there was some new sort of social sort of things that came out of it, like buying stuff online and auctions for selling stuff worldwide.
Right. People knew there needed to be a market, but it was getting the investors to believe people would go out to online buying instead of stores.
This is absolutely fascinating.
The wonderful world of analytics.
Well, it's a byproduct of the internet age, that's for sure.
That's right.
Because obviously all this data goes somewhere for somebody to work out potentials. All of it. Do you guys have Firefox at all?
I have Firefox, but I don't use it.
Okay, there's a tool in Firefox, alright? I'll just find a YouTube video and you can have a look at it. You'll be fascinated about this, alright? Because basically what you're talking about is the analytics, all right? Say any sort of tool, browser, website that you go to has potential hook-ins by, like, say I use Weebly as my website browser, sort of foundational product that allows me to create my website. Well, by default, like, say, those sort of website development companies, they've got links to sort of data collection places. So you're looking at Andrew and stuff like it's likely that the product that he based his website on has all these links. So you can see the sprawl of the data collection. So these analytics sort of things. This light beam shows you your browser by what you browse, the links up to the analytics and the data collection.
I'm watching your light beam thing. This is interesting.
One thing I learned about the internet is it's not stable. It's very fluid, and stuff will disappear, you know. But I guess like one of the interesting things in the 90s was when Netscape Navigator and Internet Explorer were competing. Microsoft and Novell Networks. Or Netscape was a pure company on its own. And they used to actually charge for the browsers.
Yeah, the first challenger to the market. Yes. And Netscape had a huge IPO opening, and it stayed good until, because Microsoft at that time, Internet Explorer, was having horrible issues with viruses, which were targeting Microsoft itself. But for some reason, Internet Explorer would, how do I put it, just shut down for no reason or have some type of conflict with its own operating system that it would cause blue screens.
Yeah.
Yeah, like just during power fluctuations.
Yeah. Then what Microsoft did is they gave it away.
Yep.
And that was like totally...
Yeah, that was the best thing because they ran into Millennium. You know, they tried to give everyone to buy Millennium at the same time they were giving us, you know, Explorer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's when like Microsoft were in the full antitrust case about Office embedded in sort of operating system and stuff.
Yep.
And yeah,
and they were
it was typical Bill Gates, like have huge resources and then undercut your competition, you know, to destroy them. But I remember reading this really interesting magazine article about the guy that founded Netscape. And he was like worth $500 million bucks, and they were talking about him going into a bank and getting like this really like elitist sort of like banking deal, like bank deposit. You know, it was fascinating because he got so much money from the IPO, like paper value. He was like in the elitist sort of like financial 1% sort of thing. So much money was made in that pre-Y2K. Like people would just start a website and then they'd IPO it and it'd be like worth millions, if not billions, like pets.com or something like that.
But that was to support DARPA. All of those fake things, they were trying to bring off-world money into the system so that the system would invest into some of its off-world seed sources. Okay, as well as making money out of thin air in the Babylonian Money Project. But they were bringing back like a half ton of gold whenever they needed it. You know, we just found it in the rocks. It wasn't, you know, military found gold because the military has its own mining organization. They just don't like people to know about it.
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
You know, I know they've got actually satellites that can scan the frequencies of the region to actually work out where the resources are, you know.
That's right. They know where it all is.
Yeah. They've got the technology because I did, around that era, I was doing surveying before I got into IT. And because I had very bad allergies, I couldn't actually do surveying in the field. So I actually started doing like GIS, like global positioning sort of spatial data sort of things that like councils would use with associating, you know, what like information against sort of like blocks of property and that. And then we did like analytics of satellite imagery. which is just the data set with numbers and its frequency. Like like the unseen, they can totally. This was in the 90s, and this was the public stuff for like looking at large sort of images of regions, and you could do filters with map info and stuff, like these really amazing sort of tools that would really like algorithmically and mathematically find particular frequencies relative to plants and stuff. The government can find all the like the marijuana crops because they have a unique signature. It's just like, let's do the marijuana frequency. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's very, very easy. It's phenomenally how easy, because it's just once you get the understanding what a frequency is, like the Raymond Rife sort of stuff. It's you just put a filter in, there it is.
Bingo, it is.
I mean, that was the 90s, and that was public, and it was interesting because like the surveyors that were teaching us were talking about the GIS, and they said, we know when the US are like bombing someone because they removed like the plus or minus 200 variance in the standard deviation for the accuracy. So it's like, because the military controlled the GIS sort of stuff, and it was like, they're bombing someone because we know we're getting really accurate surveying sort of things,
That's cool.
Yeah, they joked about it. Because like around the time of the first Gulf War, it was like GPS was very raw in the public sense. So they used to build in a deliberate error rate so that like oppositions to the US couldn't use their GPS to use for their weapons. And then it's just funny. But you were going to say something? I think I interrupted you, mate.
It's cool. It's cool. You had a cool ad on there. The 90s, the dot-com bubble, DARPA directly related there because they needed to expand the compartmentalization of new programs so other parts like of the big military industrial complexes wouldn't know what was being even done inside their own companies. So they needed to have multiple versions of that so they could make a parts industry for large-scale vessel construction, deep underground vessel construction that was coming out of Mexico. Yeah. Because, they would all be linked into a tunnel system, so all the parts can be assembled in their own tunnel system and sent right to the cavern where it was being built. And as soon as it's done being built, it doesn't need to fly out, it teleports out.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You have an internal shipyard and an endless stream of parts coming to it.
So it was like it was a two-part thing where it was to sort of launder resources back into the Babylonian system undercover.
Yes.
But then also like suck it dry for like allocating resources for technology that they needed.
Right, state-sponsored scamming of their own citizens.
Yeah, that bubble was enormous. Like it was enormous.
Yeah, it's none of the news doesn't accurately report how enormous it really was, because 2008 is still the leftover bubble of deals that were inked that were 10, 20, or 8-year deals. Like, there's still debt that created the derivatives market from the 2000 dot-com bubble that's still going through the Babylonian money curse. They themselves created that floating bubble so they could do whatever they needed to do to, let's just say, control the incarnation grid via debt.
Yeah.
Right. Because that money could come back into someone's frequency, and then if that money was back, they would be open to a different set of babies to come into their frequency and have children. If the debt was there, certain frequencies were blocked out. That's the bigger thing, because what did the 90s end in? Fear.
Yeah. Y2K.
And 2001.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That whole Y2K was a massive psyop.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
I remember I actually started work like the week after Phantom Menace got released, because Phantom Menace, the movie, I remember going to a midnight session of that, and then I started my job in IT the following week, and basically it was like 6 months before Y2K, and in that time I was going around with like a floppy disk, going to all the computers and running a Y2K check for the DOS on it. and like companies like HP and Dell and all that, all these enormous companies were just like reinvesting into new updated hardware to just get rid of the old stuff. And,
There's a bigger reason beyond getting rid of the old stuff. They needed to create a brand new industry in the universities so they could begin separating mindsets that can be understand the digital world and then be, let's just say, targeted by future technologies that were going to come as the 90s evolved into cell phones, into the way cell phones created materialism and consumerism, because it would be the infrastructure of IT people who ultimately were making great money that would subtly influence all of the cultures worldwide.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay? They had to have mass volumes of IT guys because that was a whole new perception. You're an IT guy. What does that mean? I don't know anything about my computer. I ask you.
Yeah.
That didn't. You were a magician in the beginning.
Yeah, you're a geek and a sort of this weirdo in society. So the whole perception management of the technical people got shifted.
Right. Or we weren't a geek. You were their savior.
Yeah.
Oftentimes, the savior.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, like the internet got implemented like mid-80s to sort of obviously this time, and it was like what you're sort of saying is, to me, it's like one of the first big like overstretching programs of the complement, like once the completion of the implementation of the internet's there, it's how it's actually been deployed on a greater scale.
How it's being consumed also.
Yeah.
So if you look, we were talking about the 90s, the dot-com bubble. So some of those ideas were just ideas that had been around that just people figured out how to put on the internet, like an internet shopping, where all you need to do is call your shopping list in, and if you're within 90 miles of a distribution site, they'll deliver it to you for a charge. Okay? Like that existed before. It's just, it was how the shared lists work and people that found out about the services, use telephone book style.
Yeah.
So that one crashed horrible because they tried to invest into infrastructure with the IT at the same time instead of literally making it a digital market. Think about when digital markets really arrived. Mandy would know this because she was in the thick of having to be in the digital market.
Yes, absolutely.
You know, having to put your own buy now button.
Absolutely.
Yeah, the instant gratification really got amplified, and I've also got the idea of like the postal networks, obviously, because that was a big sort of thing that you've said related to the Vatican.
Right. So the postal network was going to be crushed because it was the wizards class that created the postal network, because every post office has a black pole inside it that's related to the Pope back in Rome. And the post office is actually how the Pope would send information to the kings who were at war out in the countries. So there's a whole issue behind the post system. The post system was its own secret order all the way up until, let's just say, when the stock market crashed and they needed to let go of a tremendous bloated pork belly ridden wizard class that did nothing. Okay. So they basically maintained a post, and they didn't need them to maintain the post anymore because everything was wired. So
technology.
As the technology took over, all of these other posts, they weren't needed. So they need to get rid of those guys. And those are the guys that became IT. So the Post, when internet tried to create its direct drop ship process, the post office itself was proven to be so ineffective worldwide that they had to go to FedEx and UPS that could guarantee a delivery within their infrastructure. Like the amount of postal theft that goes on is just it's insane.
Yeah.
That's what the dot-com bubble revealed about the post office. And then they began to massively defund the post office in the 90s so FedEx and UPS could create its own air freight organizations and buy actual high volume air freight planes, like from Boeing, direct created, the biggest ones.
Freight models, yeah. I'm very much across the airline industry and stuff, and it's
Yeah.
yeah.
So that was also what the 90s was. Is
It
those
revealed- it revealed a new market for certain aspects of the marketplace as it was. Yeah.
preparing monopolies that they knew would come 10 years later.
Yeah.
Right. So they could build their own infrastructure because no one else had the foresight of what the digital markets really were going to do. Those CEOs at that era were not technically trained. They didn't understand what an internet site even was.
Yeah, like, obviously, I mean, I'll talk about my own personal experience in that time because, like, I've said, like, DJing was a major foundation of who I was in the 90s. And because the inability to source the records I wanted in my local city because they were kept to all the DJs and stuff, and it was like the rest of the people were given the scraps off the Longshanks table, so to speak. I started exploring the internet in the early 90s, mid 90s, because I knew the tracks and I knew how rare like vinyl was. And once they were sold, they were sold. So I started exploring through websites that were starting to spring up. And then I would actually organize to send a check over, like a banker's check. I'd send a bank check over, and then I'd get like an account. I'd send like hundreds of pounds, which was a lot of money back then because the Aussie dollar was worth nothing. And then it would they would get the check, they would hold it, and then the records would come, and I'd have to call them sometimes to confirm what they had and all that because it was like not updated all that much. And then they would send it to me, and it would take maybe 3 months for me to get records. And it was like, you look at that now, and I'm observing myself for the instant gratification because I used to just hang out to see if I got a parcel, and I could wait for 3 months, and it was like I had that patience. But now, I mean, I get vitamins and stuff, and it's like one instance I'm actually waiting for a DL package, and it comes from the US in 5 days.
Yep.
And it's fascinating.
So you were Mr. Foresight then. You ever see the movie Catch Me If You Can with Leonardo DiCaprio?
Yeah.
Like what that guy was doing in check fraud in the 70s and as an airline pilot was crazy.
Yes. And then he joined the FBI,
Yep. Then he joined the FBI.
But I get the whole concept of instant gratification because it's like to be able to sit at home, buy something, like a book or whatever or something, and it's delivered to your door in a very short amount of time. It's brilliant, sort of.
Or digitally delivered.
Yeah. It's brilliant consumerism to appease the masses, like in the volume that obviously was going to, in part, justify the internet and all that. People see it as a part of their life now, and then social media pops up and it's like, I'm not really engaged in social media. I don't get involved because I like meditating and it's just a distraction. It takes me away from that. That's my basic foundation. But you see all the laws, like Facebook is like, oh, you posted something on there, it's in court, it's valid now, what you do on there is valid for like legal sort of repercussions now. To me, that was like a total like concept of why social media was there, because it's to be an avenue of sort of, that aspect.
Yeah. The cashless to digital money. Absolutely right, Mandy. When you can start taking your own credit cards, and as not a brick and mortar place, that's where the merchant industry had a hard time dealing with the internet industry. Whole merchant banks needed to be created just solely for that.
Yeah.
And that's why deregulation actually occurred in the 80s under Ronald Reagan, which then set the standard for the whole world to deregulate the banks. Because the bank said you had to be a brick and mortar place. And if you're an internet website, you don't need to be a brick and mortar place.
Yeah, like it's fascinating, some of the ads for like, say, Visa and that. It's like they're using shame of people that use cash at the moment because you're taking too long to buy a coffee in the morning.
That's right.
Very subtle sort of like, because Visa and sort of MasterCard, sort of American Express and all that, the credit cards have obviously done really well.
So that is something we should pick apart, is their corporate ads. Seriously.
Yeah.
What is Visa projecting to you, but not telling you what the client is losing 1% to 7% at times, depending on their merchant account.
Yeah. And
sometimes have to have a certain amount of it withheld for 6 months.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there's the financial services industries like insurance and all that. I remember watching that Stefan, he's got a French name and he's from from Canada. And he did a thing about Bitcoin versus cash. And in that he talked about an overall stat of the financial services industry cost the US economy 8 to 15% of the whole economy per year.
Uh-huh.
And it's like, it's a $14 trillion economy? So,
yep. Well, if you believe those numbers.
True.
I believe it's actually a much higher, and how do I put this? They're only using the publicly accepted technological metrics. There is a sub-metric that isn't included there, which is for the upfront facade of the military that needs tanks, airplanes, and all of those things to maintain a reality bubble. Okay? At that technological level. That metric isn't included in the public numbers, and that metric probably doubles that because of all the infrastructure that needs to be supported for all of the secret programs that all have their own infrastructure separated from compartments.
Yep.
And then the operating budget for that. Yeah. So there's actually the military-industrial complex has its own market numbers that the bankers know internal, and that's what they use to drive the other market, which doesn't know of the other data sets. Because within that, they understand what technology from the military has practical materialism and consumerism aspects to integrate directly into the technology.
Yeah, yeah.
So what was really interesting of how they started actually controlling markets and merchandise was when the banks stopped giving loans to industries to hold inventories.
Oh yeah.
Of merchandise.
You know why that came from? Federal motor carrier laws wanted to have taxation for live freight.
Exactly.
Yep. Because they have what's called just-in-time loads now. And that makes, so you could have your inventory plus your inventory that's always in motion, which is a commodity that can be rerouted and sold. And they wanted...
Comes from a value of a bond.
Yep. But the whole bond market crashed out because municipalities were creating bonds and never paying them back. You know, Hershey, Pennsylvania racked up, I think, what is it, $700 million in bonds? And it's not a gigantic city, but it is the capital of Pennsylvania. And there's all over the world that's doing that because the government regulated bonds when the savings and loans industry went under. It also redid the bond industry, but nobody realized the impact until 15 years later because the bonds were 10 and 15-year bonds or 20-year bonds or 30-year bonds.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yep.
it's all about kicking the can down the road, so to speak.
Uh-huh.
Because it's like you credit debt, and once you credit debt, you're hooked in for until you lose it.
That's right.
And it's just a matter of how long you choose to lose it, and then the whole reissuance of bonds at another time with the added total to the original plus the debt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the reason that was done was to fractionalize currency to create derivatives markets for direct application of debt to block political moves worldwide. So the banking industry became its own strategical front end and back end of promoting wars, which were mass investment of the military industrial complex. What did the 90s start with? A war.
Yeah.
Gulf War. What did the 90s end with?
Yugoslav war, politics.
And exactly, NY2, Bosnia Herzegovina, so on and so forth. Ukraine, not Ukraine, Poland, Czechoslovakia.
So going back to the say the secret space sort of program related to the internet, we sort of dropped a comment about Iran-Contra, and it was about sort of harvesting energy and stuff. And I don't want to get into that topic at the moment because that's a whole topic in itself. But you sort of alluded to there was a whole energy harvest through the drugs, to redeploy energy and stuff. And it feels like this is all interrelated.
Absolutely. That this relates to what the Supreme Court of the 90s was doing to prepare a lawyer class for large volumes of divorces, bankruptcies, etc. They needed a lawyer class in place to milk it even more. More lawyers were graduated in the 90s than lawyers since the dawn of history. That's how many lawyers were graduated in the 90s.
And the other thing I don't want to tangent here, but the World Trade Organization was really being pushed. I remember that impact in Australia for manufacturing and all that sort of stuff. Is that allowed here, or is that something separate?
No, that's related. So World Trade Organization came as the derivatives markets were affecting, let's just say, bigger term plans from puppeteers. Puppeteers knew those markets existed. They just didn't have the predictive models of how fast they could change things early on. So once they realized they needed to have a common area of who was playing derivatives markets so everyone's play could be done. If they all agreed to rig the whole system, it was really easy to keep it going. So that was the unification of the Babylonian money magic and the final removal of the wizard class from running the system. It was its automated system with the AIs involved in it.
Because you talk about the lawyer class and stuff, and it's like the World Trade Organization sort of checkmates the whole legal of the region as well.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's like a global sort of reach that imposes over the local and the federal sort of regions. Yeah.
World Trade Organization actually came out of World Health Organization dealing with the AIDS industry, industry that was created for AIDS, because AIDS was being, spread, but once it got into the population, it spread, very, very fast. It was through blood. It was introduced into actual, people that were having transfusions and stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like the World Trade Organization opened up markets and stuff. And it's interesting, there's a word being used right now, it's called protectionism. A lot of the corporate sort of CEOs are sort of, don't go protectionism and stuff, but the whole World Trade Organization made tariffs and stuff for local realities to protect the manufacturing in a region sort of null and void, which meant all the middle class got shifted somewhere else in the world, So
redistributed based off of if the local government and national government was enforcing the reality rules they were asking for. Yeah. And if they did, they got all the jobs coming in, which gave them more power over their local districts. Okay? So when you remove one and send to another, so the one that is losing the jobs, the esoteric side comes in and begins to milk it. And then the physical side there is the infrastructure begins to fall apart. The side that's coming in is generating energy, and there's harvesting units all over it.
Yeah, so there's like a dangling local reality carrot from a corporate level.
And the lawyer class represents the common layman's medium into the Babylonian money curse. So as soon as you're working one, you're contracting them, and which is contracting the Babylonian money curse.
Which is like delegating karma, essentially.
Right. So the lawyer class doesn't realize they're what's working through their unseen agreements.
Yeah. Because everyone's sort of given an incentive to what they do for their comforts and lifestyle.
Right.
Going back to the IT people, it's one of the things for me was I could have a good life, that was incentive. There was a demand, so there was a incentive for people to go into that in their free will choice. In the modern consumer sort of instant gratification sort of aspects of the society, based on materialism and consumerism.
And then materialism, consumerism. So that as an industry came out of, how do I put this? As the 90s graduated the first technological classes. So there were mega universities all over the world. Like an example, Ohio State has 68,000 students. Every state in the United States, their capital of their state has a university that has 40 to 60,000 students. Now, some states have 10 or 12 major cities, and they all have their own university with numbers just as near that. So you had over 40 million graduating students and 11 million of them lawyers.
Wow.
Right.
I mean, I'm also thinking I've just done the video on the brain drain of the 60s, 70s, and 80s, and obviously there's an even bigger sort of production of sort of that in the brain aspect. Yeah.
So the replacement was the lawyer class. As the others were being drained away, the lawyer classes would be taken over. This would assist us at staying ignorant by having to defer power, because the system had become so complicated you had to contract someone to translate it for you, who never gave you the truth of what they were telling you, because they didn't know they were being used in most cases.
Yeah. So I'm seeing a relationship to the scale of the lawyer sort of class relative to the digital money sort of technological sort of like escalation. Yeah.
Right. So the lawyer class also acted as the vanguard to protect the military-industrial complex from the negative things it had to do to suppress certain forms of its technology, making it into, open markets for whatever reason.
Yeah.
Or to suppress somebody else's great discovery.
Yeah.
To, use the lawyers to create the fake patent system that's going on now.
I was thinking the patents, mate. The patents sort of infrastructure to suppress like all sorts of stuff and intellectual property.
That's all the lawyer class did all that.
Because I mean, the patent sort of thing has been going around for a long time, but obviously in the 90s with digital sort of stuff, it actually got escalated quite a bit,
Because if you really think about how did offices really change in the 90s, most of them were on an IBM
S-class server, that was probably around since the mid-'80s.
Yeah.
That operate workstations and still had disks.
Yeah.
To PCs, Windows 3.14. To Windows, I don't know if you remember 3.14.
I do. It sucked.
Yeah, it sucked. Versus, the Mac operating system.
Yeah.
What did you start on computer-wise?
It was interesting because I'm not a big Mac fan now, but it was definitely Macs in our and Commodore 64s.
Yeah, we had 64s also.
Yeah, I think so. Mine was an MS-DOS base anyways.
But one of the first games I ever played was on a computer. Commodore 64 were big for games, and obviously games in the 80s were what it was about. But I remember playing that Defender of the Crown and this golf game on the Mac, and it was like the screen was the grey and black, but still the detail was more impressive in that than anything else on the market, So the screens were small, and it was grey screen, like black and grey, but still like what they were able to create in that was still phenomenal. So, and the mouse was amazing.
Was that monochromatic screens?
Yeah. But
and then trackballs, remember trackballs to mouse, yeah.
But I also know, like, say for instance, Oracle was like a military sort of database management program that became public, And
Yep.
Oracle is like, and Larry Ellison is one of the wealthiest people on the planet, and Oracle is like one of these biggest sort of information like management companies out there.
Right, and that was DARPA's first attempt to really change Wall Street.
Yeah.
Okay, Wall Street knew what it was. To literally change the banking industry, because the old guard in banking need to be moved out because they were not thinking correctly. They were still making people do handwritten reports and checking computers. Checking the values of the accounting system.
Yeah, it's like the movie Trading Days.
Right. I can't tell you the amount of stories Natalie told me about, convincing whole boardrooms of companies to upgrade, from, pretty much handwritten everything, and then one person out of that every 50 in the company having a computer.
Yeah.
Yeah. All the companies.
That still happens today.
Yeah, all the companies she modernized with that. That still happens today. Yeah, one computer to every 50 people.
So it's like, let's say I use that model of Oracle that becomes a public sort of tool. It's like things like Google and search engines, like that time of the records sort of thing I mentioned. There were initial ones, but obviously the power of search engines really came in. It was a bit like, say, Microsoft went for software over hardware because they envisaged that hardware will get to some pinnacle point where it would become, so then the ability to filter the volume of data out there was obviously a big thing. Yeah.
So then you had another thing, the first publicly listed mercenary company, Blackwater.
Yeah.
That was another result of the 90s. Now, mercenaries have been in history since the dawn of war. This was a publicly traded mercenary corporation that ultimately became its own bank. Just like, you don't realize what mercenary companies do and how they do their logistics and how they do their contracts and shit.
Yeah, socially accepted, basically. That's what you're saying, because people have a skin in the game, literally. Yeah, like I see publicly listed companies as entities.
Well, there are, according to law over here, publicly companies are people.
Absolutely.
Babylonian money system. They are a person. You are harming them.
Like becoming a human resource for a publicly listed company, Mm-hmm. Very interesting words. Like you're an instrument for a entity that you don't know how operates on the unseen levels.
That's right.
Harvesting life force.
Yeah. It's like, them being able to change the terms of agreement on you and you never knowing it.
Yeah.
Does that sound like a negative entity? Does that sound like a ghost? Yes.
What about how stock market was sort of more of an exclusive class to actually becoming more of a middle class sort of accessible sort of thing?
All right, so to make the banker and lawyer class work, they needed to replace what was the elite management organization. So they basically, the people with all the money who were the playboys and socialites, all of their people suddenly became richer than the playboys and socialites, and the playboys and socialites were greatly downgraded from any knowledge or wisdom of what the secret organizations were doing. So that there was a whole different perception of what the top was doing. So the people at the bottom would go into the education system, become a banker, become a lawyer, to become what they were trying to force out of the society.
Yeah. Because, I don't want to get away from the mercenary company thing, because that's a big thing. Because what you say is, say, you made a comment to me in the past, which is another thing to explore, about how, say, first-person shoot 'em game sort of operators and other people that play games actually take on board the karma of the corporation.
That's right.
So people that actually financially benefit from sort of the acts that a mercenary company sort of gain for, what happens with that?
Well, that is another derivative market. So the wizard class is what created the way to observe that unseen market. And it's the digital light technology and spiritual light technology that was hybridized through the artificial intelligence to use the analytics from this side to create a metrics and analytics for the other side, so harvesting can be targeting and effective based off of what the military-industrial complex was creating through weather control and all that other stuff. Yeah. So they hybridized, synthesized what magic was, and created it into a technology. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So it's basically like, I might stop for a general sort of statement about my perception right now, but there was this sort of desire to actually make money in business point of view, and say going the stock market was another way, because I actually went that path. And
it was the new avenue of war to manipulate nation states, political agendas, and puppeteered agendas, because they weren't really unified then.
Yeah.
but the new infrastructure forced unification at the banking level, forced unification at the lawyer level. If you have 11 million lawyers in this country and 4 million lawyers all in Europe wide, what's going to happen? You're going to get outlawed.
Yeah. But then in the public sort of sense, see, me as a trader, I get involved and I see, say, an opportunity. I'd say, if, just hypothetical, I see this mercenary company that's like got an opportunity because they signed a big contract with the government, then for me as a member of the public, I have an incentive to support whatever they do because there's a financial benefit in my pocket. So then it's like people might be sort of, they might be, I forget the word, but it's like there's certain idealists in the way they operate, but then there's a inner battle of like, do I take this gain from an act that someone else is doing because it makes my life better in a materialistic, sort of way, or, so it actually perpetuates what's going on.
Mandy, what was your view of the 90s, the technology that came through you in business? How did it actually change the office as a structure?
It's interesting because at that time I was in the manufacturing industry, and I was running a plastic manufacturing company, and the software that they had that was actually like running just a couple of machines versus the manual labor. It was during probably like 95, 96 when they were looking at having it automated.
Uh-huh.
And the ripple effects throughout the whole plastic industry when they started coming out with the new software was incredible. There was even the way logistically, there was software that started coming up as to how to load different sized transport vehicles or containers or stuff like that. And again, there was like a massive loss of jobs or think tanks because the software was doing it all. It was just inputting your information and having the instant answers and there was no thinking to it anymore.
You didn't need to have someone in the office that was dedicated to just do that as a job.
Yep.
Yeah. You could self-train yourself and really fast to learn it.
Exactly.
What about the technology, like computers? What were the computers and printers? How did they really change the office? Because that's the other whole part of the industry. Everything as jobs we don't realize was changed in the 90s. The whole way jobs work.
Yeah. Yeah, even being able to communicate to other plants worldwide was a task in itself compared to what it is today.
Yep.
Even the computers, like even the data storage was nowhere near what it is today. So just having warehouses to hold all physical documents like archives were a crazy amount of tasks compared to what we do today.
Right. Document storage is now digital storage, to the point where lawyers have actually passed the laws. They only have to keep the information for 7 years instead of 20.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
And it's gone from hard copies, which are like very solid evidence that can't be manipulated, to like the digital, which can be as well.
Easily manipulated. Yes.
Like you've talked about going to the cloud in a stream read where it's like very accessible on some levels potentially, and
Yep.
history can be redacted or changed, you know, like in real time.
That's right.
History
Right.
can be done in real time.
But I'm also getting what you're saying, like say a corporation might hire like warehouse space to hold all that data, and then it might actually hire people to actually do some sort of tasks that are no longer needed. And then it's also like specialist sort of tasks, like I was going to mention, like before I did my surveying sort of training, that I did technical graphics. So it's like schematic sort of designing by engineers, you know? Like you did it, like I remember like say particular models of Boeing jets that, like there was a supersonic jet in the 70s and 80s that went through like decades of development, like that never got built, and Boeing lost the contract, and they had to lay off 40,000 highly technical engineers, you know, because they did it all manually back then. I mean, they were probably,
There wasn't a system in place.
yeah,
That was all done on purpose because they needed the technological effete class to take over the physical labor effete class. Like making drawings for an airplane that was for a highly, top secret thing. That was the bee's knees of a job.
yeah, yeah. So you're talking like what Mandy saw in the workplace, and a lot of like the really highly specialized sort of skill set sort of tasks just got, made redundant. The whole industry got made redundant on those sort of levels. Because
So what was an ancestral way of doing business that could be easily planned with of who you were going to get along in your job or not, because the jobs were defined and the roles were expressed, suddenly was changed to something where the Babylonian money system was always within everyone's field. It was a competitional market, not a family market.
Yeah, yeah.
They totally changed all of that.
Yeah, I mean, like, say our parents could actually look to get a career and have it for life.
Right.
And these days there's no stability at all, because obviously things change very quick and all that, so there's a real like absence of stability sort of thing.
That's right. But that's all done on purpose.
Obviously that shakes out a lot of energy to harvest,
Yep.
and redeploy.
All that misery.